The wind had been screaming across the Wyoming plains for 2 long days. It was a sharp, thin howl that scraped the world clean and pushed the snow into tall white walls. Outside Silas Ward's cabin, nothing existed except a storm so fierce it seemed alive. Inside, Silas sat at his rough, hand-built table, oiling a rifle trap mechanism. The click of metal was the only sound he controlled. Everything else belonged to the storm and the crackling fire. He lived alone by choice. 3 years had passed since he buried his wife Sarah on the ridge behind the cabin, the grave covered now by heavy snow. The silence that followed her death had nearly crushed him, so he had taken the silence into his own hands. He built his life out here far from towns and people, believing that the world had forgotten him, and he had been glad for it. Which was why the sound, when it came, felt like betrayal. A knock, soft, weak, almost lost in the roaring wind. Silas froze. His hand stopped moving on the metal. He waited. The storm mocked him, screaming through the cracks. Then came another sound, more a dragging scrape than a knock. A tired hand, almost too weak to try again. No one came out here. Not in summer, and never in a blizzard like this. Anyone traveling in this storm would have died long before reaching his clearing. He stood slowly, the floorboards sighing under him. His hand brushed the knife at his belt. Not the rifle, not yet. He went to the door, lifted the heavy iron latch and pulled it open. The storm rushed in like a living thing, snatching the door from his grasp. Snow exploded across the floor, killing the fire's light for a moment. And then something fell inside, a shape more snow than person, a bundle of ice and frozen cloth. Silas grabbed the door again and slammed it shut, his shoulders straining. The room dimmed, the lamp flickering back to life. He turned. The bundle on the floor did not move. He knelt beside it, pushing back a hood stiff with ice. A face appeared beneath, young, pale from cold, lips cracked, skin bluish. A woman. Damn, Silas muttered. Not in pity, but in anger at the intrusion. Trouble had come to his door wrapped in snow. She was half frozen. If he left her there, the storm would finish what it started. He hesitated only a moment. Some part of him, the part that remembered holding Sarah's hand, would not let her die on his floor. He lifted the woman easily. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her to the fire and laid her on the fur rug. Her clothes were wet, stiff, and torn. She smelled like cold earth and fear. Her hands were the worst. The fingertips were dark, swollen with frostbite. Silas grimaced. The storm had nearly taken her already. He fetched his whiskey bottle and tilted it to her lips. Drink. Some spilled, but enough went down to make her cough. Her eyes fluttered, dark and empty with exhaustion. "My name," she whispered, voice rough as gravel. "Hush," Silas said. "Save your breath." He pulled out a warm rag and a bowl of water. The wet, frozen clothes had to come off or she would never warm. It made him tense, made his jaw tighten. This was a line he did not want to cross, but it was this, or let the cold win. He worked fast, rough from urgency but careful as he could be. He removed the frozen layers one by one, revealing bruises on her arms, deep, angry marks that did not come from the storm. This woman was not just lost, she was running. He wrapped her tightly in his wife's old quilt, heavy with cedar scent. It had not been touched in 3 years. Now it warmed a stranger. Silas stepped back, his chest tight with memories he did not want. He moved to his cot and watched the woman by the fire. She shivered violently, teeth clicking. She was alive, for now, but she carried secrets. He could feel them like cold air leaking through the door. Hours later, she woke again. The room was warm now, the fire strong. The smell of rabbit stew filled the cabin. For a moment she stared, confused, as if she had washed up in some strange world. Then, fear hit her like a wave. She saw him. Silas Ward. A large man with a rough beard, hard jaw, cold winter sky eyes, and hands scarred from a lifetime of wounds. He looked like the kind of man the world listened to or feared. She tried to sit up. Pain forced her back down. "You're safe from the storm," he said. His voice was deep, unused to speaking. He did not add that she was not necessarily safe from him. He ladled broth into a tin cup and crouched beside her. When he held out the cup, she flinched from his hand, as if she expected harm. "Drink," he said. "Or don't. Up to you." She forced herself to grip the cup. The warmth of the broth made her eyes close with relief. When she finished, he asked, "Who are you?" She hesitated. Fear flickered across her face. "Anna," she said finally. "Anna Smith." It was a lie, a clumsy one. Silas could see that as clearly as the snow outside. But he said nothing. Not yet. The storm trapped them together in a cabin built from grief, danger, and silence. And Silas felt it already. This woman was going to change everything. The blizzard outside was slow to die. For 4 long days, the wind screamed, the windows rattled, and the cabin became a tiny island in a sea of white. Silas kept his distance from the woman he had pulled out of the storm, but he watched her with a quiet, heavy caution. She was healing slowly, her color returning one shade at a time, though the frostbite on her fingers still ached. Every morning, Silas left the cabin to tend to the goat, check the traps close to home, and split firewood. At first, he locked the door from the outside. Then he noticed she never tried to leave. The snow was too deep, the cold too sharp. There was nowhere she could go. Inside, she mended. She had found his sewing kit and spent hours fixing his shirts and trousers, her stitches neat and patient. Silas would come in from the cold and see her small figure bent over sewing, the firelight soft on her face. It stirred something inside him he didn't want to name. One afternoon he came back with a skinned rabbit. She jumped when the door opened. Her hands froze in midair over the cloth in her lap. "I don't need you cleaning up," he said gruffly, tossing the rabbit onto the table more roughly than needed. "I am repaying you for the food," she said quietly, eyes lowered. "I don't need repaying. I need you gone." "As soon as the snow melts," she whispered. Their shared silence returned, but now it was heavier, full of unspoken things. Slowly, they learned each other's rhythms. She noticed the way he rubbed the rim of an old bent tin cup, his wife's. He noticed the way she trembled if he approached too fast. They kept their distance, yet the small cabin pulled them close again and again. One evening, he passed her a bowl of stew. Their fingers brushed. She recoiled so sharply the stew spilled onto the floor. She stared at the mess, her face pale. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Silas didn't scold her, didn't question her. He simply refilled the bowl and set it near her pallet on the floor. She watched him in confusion. This man's silence was strange. It was not like the heavy, threatening silence she knew from her past. It was a quiet that held room for her fear, not a weapon used against her. The blizzard finally broke. The world outside was bright and white, sunlight reflecting off the snow like shards of glass. She stood on the porch, wrapped in the heavy quilt he had given her. Silas chopped wood, the thud of the axe steady and sure. "You'll freeze," he said without looking at her. "Show me," she answered softly. Silas stopped mid-swing. "Show you what?" "How to chop." "You're not strong enough." She lifted her chin. "I can't just sit." He stared at her. She was thin, bruised, still healing. But her eyes held a quiet determination that surprised him. With a low sigh, he handed her the axe. "Feet apart. Grip here. Don't use your arms. Use your back. Let the axe do the work." Her first swing barely grazed the log. He didn't laugh. He didn't scold. He just said, "Again." She tried, again, and finally the wood split with a sharp crack. A brief, shy smile touched her lips before she looked down to hide it. Silas felt something shift inside him, something warm, something dangerous. Days passed. She grew steadier on her feet. Stronger. She milked the goat under his watch, tended the fire, learned how to bank coals so the flames would survive the night. But one lesson broke the fragile peace. The goat kicked over the bucket again. Clara flinched so hard she nearly fell backward. "You're too soft," Silas said, stepping behind her. He took her hands in his, guiding them gently. "Hold firm, like this." Her body went rigid. A trembling started in her hands, traveling up her arms, gripping her like a cold wind. She stopped breathing. Silas felt it, felt her fear like it had weight. He pulled his hands back at once, stepping away as if the touch had burned him. Clara hid her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Silas walked out into the cold air, his breath harsh. He didn't understand her, not fully, but he understood fear. And whatever she had run from, it still lived inside her. Nights were long in the cabin. Silas slept lightly, always ready for danger. One night, danger came from inside the walls. Clara screamed. Silas shot out of his cot, rifle in hand, heart pounding. The cabin was dark except for the dim glow of embers. "Who's here?" he shouted, scanning the shadows. No one answered. Then he saw her, thrashing on her pallet, tangled in blankets, her eyes squeezed tight in terror. "No! Get off me!" she cried. "Please! Father, help me!" Silas rushed to her side. He froze, torn between fear and caution. He had no idea how to calm a nightmare. "Girl," he said sharply, "wake up! You're dreaming." He put a hand on her shoulder. Her eyes flew open, wild with terror. She didn't see him. She saw someone from the past, someone who had hurt her. She lunged forward and grabbed him, clinging so tightly he staggered. She pressed her face into his chest, shaking so violently he feared she would break apart. "Please," she sobbed, "don't let him. Don't let him." Silas's body went stiff. His arms hung useless for a long moment. He had not held anyone since Sarah. He didn't know how. But she needed him. Slowly, awkwardly, he wrapped his arms around her. He didn't speak comforting words. He simply held her while she trembled and cried into his shirt. He became a wall around her, solid, unmoving, safe. She fell asleep like that, heavy and exhausted, leaning against him. Silas did not sleep. He stayed there through the night, staring at the fire, holding a stranger whose pain felt too familiar. By morning she woke alone on her pallet, the quilt pulled up to her shoulders. Silas was tending the fire, silent, steady. "I apologize for the night," she whispered. "No need," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. He didn't set it on the floor this time. He handed it to her. Their fingers didn't touch, but they were close. Outside, soft snow began to fall again. Inside, the storm inside both of them had begun to shift. It wasn't quiet like before. It wasn't empty. It was shared. And neither of them knew what would come next. Spring began to thaw the world around them. The snow melted into heavy mud. The creek broke open with a rushing growl, and the cabin felt too small for all the change happening inside it. Silas healed slowly from the injury he received on the roof. Clara worked harder than she ever had, splitting wood, milking the goat, tending the fire, cooking stew. She had become part of the rhythm of the place, and Silas no longer pretended otherwise. But danger came when the world opened again. One afternoon, a stranger rode into the clearing, a man in a clean suit and derby hat. Clara froze the moment she saw him. Silas felt her fear like a knife in the air. "I'm looking for a man named Ward," the stranger said politely, though his eyes were cold. "And for a girl, a runaway, name of Clara Jennings." Clara's breath left her. The name hit her like a blow. Silas stepped forward, blocking her from view. His voice was strong and steady. "You found no one. This here is my wife, Sarah." Clara stared at him, stunned. He had used his late wife's name to shield her. The stranger studied her trembling face, then Silas's tall frame. Something in Silas's eyes made him hesitate. Finally, he tipped his hat. "We'll be back." The moment they were gone, Clara collapsed onto the woodpile, shaking. "He knows," she whispered. "Silas, he knows." Quote. Silas didn't argue. He didn't lie. His jaw tightened. Inside, he ordered, "We prepare." 2 days later, the men returned, 3 riders this time, armed, determined. Silas walked into the clearing with his rifle loose at his side. Clara watched through a crack in the wooden wall, her heart hammering. "Send the girl out," the lead man shouted. "We have a warrant, attempted murder." Silas lifted his rifle. "You're not taking her." When one rider reached for his gun, Silas fired, not to kill, but to warn. The bullet exploded the dirt at the man's horse's feet, sending it rearing. "Next one goes in your chest," Silas said. The strangers fled, but they'd return with help. Stronger help. Clara knew it. Silas knew it. That night she finally told him the truth. Everything. About the cruel deacon who had trapped her. About the lies he told her father. About the struggle. The letter opener. The fear. Silas listened with a stillness that was frightening, as though her pain was carving new lines into his heart. "You didn't do wrong," he said when she finished. "You defended your life." Quote. Tears ran down her face, not from sorrow but relief. It was the first time anyone believed her. "We ain't running," Silas said. "We go to Cheyenne. We tell a judge who can't be bought." She was terrified, but she trusted him more than she trusted the fear. They left at dawn. The journey to Cheyenne was long and silent. They rode through valleys and dry riverbeds, through thick mud and thin, icy streams. At night, they made small fires and shared dried meat. Clara learned to shoot Silas's pistol. He taught her how to read tracks, how to check the snares, how to survive by wits alone. When they reached Cheyenne, the noise and crowds overwhelmed her. But Silas kept one hand on her back as they walked into the office of Judge Elias Thorne. Clara told her story, every word. The judge sent a wire to the Dakota Territory. The next day, trouble caught them before justice did. The man in the derby hat returned with hired gunmen and a Pinkerton agent. They put Silas and Clara in chains. The Pinkerton mocked Silas. "She's done. You can't save her." Silas said nothing, but the fire in his eyes was dangerous. Before they were hauled away, a telegraph boy burst into the jail waving a message. Judge Thorne read it aloud. The deacon had paid the sheriff to issue the warrant. A maid had confessed to hearing Clara screaming for help. The deacon was being arrested. The warrant was fraudulent. "Miss Jennings," the judge said, "you are cleared." Clara broke down silently, gripping the bars as though they were the edge of a cliff she was climbing away from. "And Ward," the judge added, "your assault charge is dismissed. Looks to me like you were protecting your woman." Silas looked at Clara. She looked at him. Home. They were going home. Back at the cabin, the seasons changed. Clara grew stronger. The shadows of her past faded, replaced by new rhythms. Milking Daisy, tending the small garden, mending shirts, laughing at Silas when he slipped in the mud. Silas watched her with a steady, quiet warmth. When he found out she was carrying his child, he didn't speak. He just placed his rough hand over hers where it rested on her stomach. Hope. For the first time in years, he felt hope. He built a cradle of smooth pine, carving both their initials into the headboard. He carved a small ring connecting the letters S and C bound together. Winter arrived early. A brutal storm. The wind howled, just as it had the day Clara had first stumbled into his cabin. And in the middle of the storm, Clara went into labor. Silas was terrified. The memory of losing his wife nearly crushed him. But Clara gripped his hand and pulled him back to the present. "You won't lose us," she said. "Not this time." Hours passed. Pain, fear. The storm outside raged as hard as the storm inside. And then, a cry, a strong, healthy cry. Silas held the tiny baby girl in his hands, tears falling freely. He placed her on Clara's chest. "She's perfect," Clara whispered. "What's her name?" Silas asked softly. Clara looked at him with shining eyes. "Hope." Months later, the cabin was alive with laughter, warm firelight, and the soft sounds of their daughter sleeping. Silas sat on the porch, Clara resting against his leg, the world golden in the late afternoon sun. "I thought I was broken forever," she whispered, watching the horizon. Silas touched her hair gently. "You're not broken," he said. "You're stronger than the storm." And together, with Hope sleeping safely inside the cradle Silas built, they finally